Welcome to Her Time to Talk. I'm Megan Clark, a licensed professional counselor and the founder of Her Time Therapy, a group practice dedicated to supporting women's mental health. This podcast is for women, by women, and is all about creating a safe place for our experiences, amplifying our voices, and empowering each other with the knowledge to improve our mental health. Today, we're talking about something that affects so many women: depression. Specifically, we're going to explore why women are more likely to experience depression, and most importantly, what you can do to alleviate symptoms and take the steps towards feeling better. Whether you've personally experienced depression or you're simply looking for ways to better understand mental health in women, this episode is for you. We'll be going through some common causes of depression for women, as well as practical evidence-based strategies to help lift your mood and start feeling more empowered. First, let's talk about how prevalent depression is for women. According to a survey of U.S. adults conducted from April 30th to May 27th, 2024, 14% of women in the U.S. reported symptoms of depression just within the last 2 weeks. More than 1/3 of women have been diagnosed with depression in their lifetime, and all of these statistics are even worse for women who fall into the categories of being Hispanic, Asian American, or African American. For mothers particularly, depression is really challenging, with about 76% of women experiencing what we call the baby blues, which is a general sense of low mood or mild depression after childbirth. And of those, 1 in 7 women experience clinical postpartum depression within a year of giving birth. So it's really no wonder that women struggle so much after having a child, given that the United States does not provide women with anywhere near adequate access to medical care, especially medical care related to reproductive health. We're not provided with paid maternity leave. Childcare in this country costs as much as, if not more than, a yearly salary for the average worker. And women often pay what's called a motherhood penalty when they try to re-enter the workforce. For those who are unaware of that term, the motherhood penalty is when a woman faces decreased career advancement, lower salaries, and general perceptions of reduced commitment to their careers due to childcare responsibilities falling disproportionately to mothers. Now, let's look at why depression affects women more often than men, other than the fact of children and childbirth. It's not just about the emotional weight of life, it's also biological, social, and even political. Women's lives are complex. Many of us juggle multiple roles: mothers, daughters, employees, caregivers, partners, friends, bosses, and so much more. These roles can be a source of stress, but they can also shape our emotional well-being. And to compound the impact of personal challenges like job loss, stress, or even world events like political turmoil or a global crisis, it's no wonder that depression can feel overwhelming and far too common for women. On top of all of these factors, women face systemic gender-based oppression. And no, this has not been solved. Gender-based oppression is still very, very real today, despite the advances in feminism and women's rights over the last several decades. From the wage gap to unrealistic beauty standards, these constant societal pressures drain our emotional reserves and contribute to feelings of low self-worth, which greatly increase the likelihood of depression. And if you're not up to date with a lot of the things that fall under systemic gender-based depression, I highly recommend that you go back and listen to our episode on human giver syndrome. So let's talk a moment about biological factors. Hormonal changes throughout our lives, from puberty to pregnancy to menopause, can significantly impact women's mental health. The fluctuating hormone levels during these times can sometimes feel like a roller coaster, affecting everything from our mood to our energy levels. And it's even worse for women experiencing premenstrual dysphoric disorder, or PMDD, or other medical conditions such as PCOS or endometriosis. More and more women are being diagnosed with these types of conditions and are coming into therapy to seek help managing the mental health effects of coping with these. But unfortunately, there's so little research that is being done on these conditions that there's not a lot known about them. So seeking a diagnosis, let alone effective treatment for these conditions that specifically affect women, are very difficult and sometimes impossible to access. Unfortunately, the Trump administration's efforts to restrict research funding for studies focused on women's health is just exacerbating this issue. Specifically, they've directed agencies like the National Institute of Health to avoid or completely restrict studies that are focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, including those issues that include words like women and female. By limiting financial support for research into conditions that disproportionately affect women, half the population, such as PMDD, PCOS, and endometriosis, they are hindering the progress in understanding and addressing these critical health concerns. This is even more frightening when we consider the halt in research being done for life-threatening conditions that affect women, such as breast, ovarian, and uterine cancer. This lack of funding and this oppression of women within the medical research field continues to leave women without the necessary resources to get accurate diagnoses or effective treatments, and it brings the progress being made in these areas to a standstill. As a result, women's mental and physical health suffer, and the healthcare system remains ill-equipped to support women, leaving them to navigate these complex issues and deal with all of the side effects with minimal help or guidance from medical professionals. That's depressing. So when it comes to depression, women are dealing with a combination of biological, societal, and personal factors that can create a perfect storm for mental health struggles that often grow to clinical pathological levels. And really, this is to no fault of their own. This is the environmental impact of living in this world and in the patriarchy as it is today. And on a societal scale, we need to look at the fact that limiting access to women's healthcare undermines societal strength. As research clearly shows, countries that enforce women's rights and provide unfettered access to healthcare thrive at higher rates. These countries experience improved economic stability, health outcomes, and overall prosperity. So when we know that research is out there and our country is going in the opposite direction, it's really hard as a woman to sit by and watch and cope with things that are impacting our day-to-day life and not giving us many avenues of control. It's hard to see this happening in the world and feel like we can't directly impact a lot of it because we are just one person. But we have to remember that we're not just one person. We come together and we use our voices to call attention to these issues so that we don't feel so disempowered. Now that we've talked about why women are more vulnerable to depression, let's dive into some of the common signs and symptoms of depression. Recognizing these early on is key, and it's the first step in getting the support and the care that's needed. If you're feeling persistently sad, irritable, or distressed, especially for extended periods of time, like 2 weeks or more, it might be a sign that you're experiencing clinical depression. Other symptoms might include losing interest in things that you once enjoyed, whether it's hobbies, your relationships, or your work. You may be struggling with low motivation, making even simple tasks feel overwhelming. Low energy, a desire to sleep more than usual, and waking up after sleeping several hours but still feeling exhausted. You may be tempted to self-isolate, where you pull away from friends and family. Thought patterns that are more negative may persist, so thoughts that include feelings of worthlessness or guilt or just general negative self-talk tend to grow. And there are also symptoms of depression, such as aches and pains and digestive problems. If any of this resonates with you, it's important to talk to someone. Depression doesn't just go away on its own, but the good news is there are steps that you can take to start feeling better. So let's move on to some actionable steps that you can take to reduce depression, starting with self-care. And I know it can feel overwhelming, and it might be hard to even think about taking care of yourself when you're struggling to this level where just getting out of bed feels like an insurmountable goal. But I'm here to tell you that even the smallest changes can really have a big impact. If you haven't listened to my episode on how to practice the 8 types of self-care, I really recommend going back and listening to that because ensuring your self-care practice is comprehensive and consistent is one foundational way to reduce and manage depression on an ongoing basis. Step number 1 is exercise. Now, I know this is not what you want to hear, but research has shown over and over again that physical activity is one of the very best ways to combat depression. Exercise stimulates the release of endorphins, which are our body's natural antidepressants, and help us deal with stress and even reduce feelings of physical pain. Physical activity also boosts serotonin and dopamine, which are neurotransmitters that help regulate mood and promote feelings of pleasure and overall well being. So, whether it's walking, yoga, strength training, or some kind of cardio activity, incorporating movement of any kind into your daily routine can make a noticeable difference in your mood and energy levels. If you've never really been someone who enjoys exercise, or maybe doesn't know how to, or just hasn't been able to keep a consistent exercise routine, I recommend reading Dr. Kelly McGonigal's book, The Joy of Movement. In this, she talks about how during your muscle contractions, your muscles release myokines known as hope molecules. These proteins reduce anxiety and depression symptoms, foster optimism and well being. The exercise you do does not need to be intense, and it doesn't need to be overwhelming. Just aim for something gentle but consistent. And if you're at that spot in your depression where you literally cannot get out of bed, I recommend searching on YouTube bed depression workouts. There are several personal trainers out there, some of which have mental health backgrounds, that give you some exercises you can do while lying in bed just to get your body moving and get your circulation going. And sometimes that can be enough to get you to get out of bed and change your clothes that day or to be able to take a shower. And that makes a great deal of difference. So, something as simple as a 15-minute walk, stretching while laying in bed, or walking to your window and pacing in front of it while you get some sunshine is something that can help. Our second recommendation is to focus on connecting with other women. Now, specifically, we're talking here about social support. Women benefit from really strong social connections, especially with other women who truly understand what we are going through and can have that type of validation that only another woman can seem to provide us. Whether it's chatting with a close friend, joining a women's therapy group, or even scheduling a weekly coffee date with a close friend or a sister, maintaining those connections can really help combat feelings of loneliness and isolation, which is a key contributor to depression. Interestingly, research also shows that women are naturally more likely to adopt what's called a tend and befriend strategy when they face stress, meaning that they seek social connection and support rather than isolating themselves or engaging in aggressive behaviors. So, when women are struggling, if you notice yourself tending and befriending, turning towards your friends and your female connections, this is a really natural, healthy inclination that I want to encourage you to lean into. This is often very different from what we see the men in our life do when they are stressed or are suffering emotionally. In those situations, men tend to self isolate. After all, this is what the patriarchy has conditioned them to do. It tells you to be a man, you must be strong and stoic and be able to handle any emotion, maybe other than anger, all by yourself. And it is men's lack of tend and befriend during moments of stress that is theorized to be one of the reasons men struggle more with PTSD recovery and tend to have much higher suicide rates when compared with women. So, just as a reminder, we release oxytocin when we connect, and that's a hormone that helps us feel nurtured and calm. And that's good to produce in our bodies anytime that we are struggling, no matter what the cause. So, when you're feeling overwhelmed, depressed, stressed, please reach out to someone who gets it. This could be a friend, a family member, or if you don't have anyone you can really turn to or feel is there for you, please turn to a therapist. Another way to alleviate depression is by advocating for your physical and mental health. Women's symptoms are very often dismissed, especially when it comes to mental health or physical pain that you're reporting in medical settings. But don't let that discourage you from making sure that you ask, sometimes repeatedly, for what you need. Getting regular checkups, including testing for things like your hormone levels or your vitamin D levels, can help uncover any physical issues that may be contributing to your mental health struggles. For example, those who live in the states that are not sunny and warm all year round, those states who maybe are like Colorado, where you deal with a lot of snow in the winters, it's really difficult to maintain adequate level of vitamin D in your system. And low levels of vitamin D is also correlated with depression. So, not skipping those checkups, getting your blood work done, visiting your primary care doctor can be an important step to managing your depression as well. On this note, we recommend building an integrative care team. What this means is that you and your providers work with each other in a team around your health, working with doctors, therapists, and other healthcare providers who are complementary, even personal trainers or nutritionists to support your well being from multiple angles is really ideal. The fourth thing is to really notice and challenge your negative thinking patterns. A very common feature of depression is negative self talk and automatic negative thinking. Women are especially susceptible to negative self talk, comparison, and rumination. Some women come to therapy and would summarize this as being the thought spiral. Sometimes we get stuck into a thought spiral that is really difficult to get out of, and it sucks us down deeper like quicksand. One of the powerful ways of fighting depression is to really notice when this is happening, stopping it in its tracks, and learning some strategies to unravel those negative thinking patterns so that it no longer keeps its hold over you. This is where cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT comes in. It teaches you to identify distorted thinking patterns and replace them with more positive and realistic ones. Over time, this can significantly reduce depression symptoms. For women who have negative thoughts about themselves or about the world itself and how safe we are in the world due to traumatic experiences, cognitive processing therapy and EMDR therapy can be very helpful as a part of your therapy treatment because it specifically targets some of those negative thought patterns that come up from trauma. Our fifth recommendation may be one that's a little bit surprising and one that you might not have expected, but that is to try your best to practice altruism. Now, I know when you're depressed, just taking a shower can feel like a challenge. But one of the most effective ways to fight depression is by actually turning your focus outward away from yourself. Doing something kind for someone else, whether that's as simple as sending a friend a good morning text or as big as helping your neighbor move into their new apartment, can really help you to be distracted from your own pain and lift your spirits in the process because you are seeing the good that you are putting out into the world. You're seeing the joy and the companionship that you're bringing to the person that you are connecting with and that you're being kind to. And that positive response in their nervous system will trigger those good feelings in our nervous system as well because of mirror neurons, which are things that exist in our brain that help us connect and emotionally correlate with the people that we're around. So if you are really struggling to get out of your own head and out of your own depression, do something nice for someone else and or just be around others that are in a good place. That can help you in your process of focusing outward and lifting your own mood in the process of being around them. Lastly, we recommend that you seek professional help if these self-help strategies are not feeling like enough. Everything that we listed here today is really helpful, and it's a part of an ongoing, consistent practice to keep depression symptoms at bay. But it's important to recognize when higher level help really is needed. If you're struggling with severe symptoms of depression, whether that's just a sense of difficulty getting through your day, or you're even feeling like life isn't worth living anymore, or you're experiencing physical symptoms and illnesses that won't stop, it's really time to reach out for help. Now, notice I haven't talked much about medication yet. One reason for this is that I'm not trained or licensed to be a prescriber, but it's also because women can often manage depression by making lifestyle changes. But for a lot of women, those lifestyle changes are just not enough. And you may be deep enough in your depression that these changes are impossible without some intense interventions, such as what antidepressants can provide. Antidepressant medication, such as SSRI, can be a life saving treatment that really helps you to come out of the darkness and start practicing some of the things that we talked about today. So, think about it this way: much like using crutches after breaking your ankle, antidepressants can be a great tool that you use during a period of your recovery when it would otherwise be impossible to move and function without them. Therapists like ones at Her Time Therapy specialize in providing evidence-based treatments that can help you feel better. Whether you need psychotherapy, medication, or both, getting the support you need is a crucial step towards healing. All therapists at Her Time are equipped to provide a combination of treatment and, if needed, referrals for medication or complementary healthcare that can help you build that integrative care team that you really need to recover and stay feeling your more hopeful, positive, empowered self. So if you're struggling with depression, I want you to know that you don't have to go through it alone and that depression does not define you. You are worthy of support, and there are so many ways to begin healing. Thank you so much for listening today, taking time to care for yourself by spending this time to learn and to talk with me. So until next time, please take care and don't forget to share this episode with someone who you feel may need and benefit from it. If you're feeling empowered by today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. You can also follow us on social media at Her Time to Talk for more updates and tips. And if you'd like to support the show, consider becoming a patron. If you're ready to take the next step in your mental health journey, visit hertimetherapy.com and schedule a free consultation with one of our therapists. Thank you for taking the time to talk today. Remember, your story matters, your voice is powerful, and your mental health is worth prioritizing. Until next time, take care of yourself. This is your time. The information shared on this podcast is not intended to be personal mental health advice, and listening to this podcast does not create a therapeutic relationship between the listener and the therapist featured on this podcast. We encourage listeners to engage with a licensed therapist for personalized mental health treatment and advice.